Take no prisoners. Okay.
Take no prisoners. We should start there. It's Warren Huart here. Hope you're doing marvelously well. I'm sitting here with my very good friend, Mr. Shelly Yakus. How are you, mate?
Yes, my very good friend.
Yes.
Warren, what's your name?
Fred Astaire. I'm Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers.
Yeah.
Well, we've done a few of these now.
Yes.
So we probably could get into like a comedy routine. Maybe Abbott and Costello or something like that.
Yeah, that's because I could be the fat one. The chubby one. More chins than a Chinese
We should bring
phone
Jack
book.
in. We could probably, more chins than the phonies too. So we've done a couple together.
Yes.
We recently did a Q&A, which we put out as a podcast, and it came out just 2 days before Leon Russell died. So I had a lot of people retweeting, talking, asking me questions about it, and also commenting on your Facebook and stuff like that. So there's about 1.5 million things we could talk about.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
Because you have a long, illustrious career. Sorry, does that make you sound really old?
Yes.
You know what? I'd rather have a long, illustrious career than no career at all.
Absolutely. Any day of the week. Look at all that experience that I can pass on. If anybody would listen. If they'd only listen. You know?
Well, luckily they do.
Yeah,
we always get a great response, and you're one of the favorite, when it comes to emails that people email me directly, you're like pretty close to probably being the number one questions
that's
coming
awesome.
about.
You know, if I can pass stuff on and people try it, you know, not everything I suggest is going to work for everyone out there, but it generally works. And if they could make it their own, maybe it would help them make better records. I'm not saying they need to make better records, but I think everyone can make better records. You know?
Well, there's subtle things.
Including me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm always learning. I was with Ben Gross this morning, and that was one of the final things he wrapped up in the interview was like, I said, hey, I'm always learning. And he's like, I only do this so I can keep learning, you know.
Yeah.
But we also talked about, because he's mixing on an SSL, and that's been his tool of his trade since the 80s. Although I think I said he was using VRs for a while, but essentially SSL for him. And interestingly enough, he uses API EQs across, like, I believe it was definitely the snare, maybe the kick as well. And I had said to him that you and I were talking when I was mixing the Aerosmith record that I did, that I was having a really hard time making the bass sound good on SSL. So you had suggested using the API line amps across it. So it's interesting that, you know, we come back to the same kind of ideas.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's that sort of, and you and I were talking about doing some mixing stuff where we would like do, which I think we should do some sort of like,
well, let's do it.
Comparable kind of mixing in the box versus consoles, and how to simulate that sound. I mean, these days there's so many wonderful plugins out there that you can do stuff. It's pretty insane.
You know, one of the things that I think makes a better final record or better finished record, and that's all about, you know, what separates the men from the boys is being able to make a finished sounding record or song, whatever. You know, whatever you want to call it. And there are a number of ways to do it. You just have to know if you're not finished or you are finished, and what can you do so it's not overdone. And there's a whole thing, and it's like a science. I mean, I don't think of it like that, but it turns out to be like, okay, how do you know when you're done with your mix? How do you know when it needs a little more? I don't know. Anyway.
Well, we talked before about some of your journey, but I want to talk about where you came from and where you are now.
Yeah.
Talk about what you're working on now, but I sort of want to preface it with a little bit more of the story. And I know those who have already watched the other two videos we've done probably know a little bit about it. But what is interesting is every time I talk to somebody else, they'll talk about you, they'll talk about Jack, they'll talk about Roy Cicala. But then a couple of people recently, and who was it we were talking to the other day, was talking about your dad helping get a start.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
So what was the original studio?
Was Ace Recording Studio.
And that was your father's studio?
Yes, my father and his brother, my uncle. And when they came back from the war, they decided to buy this studio. And my dad was a writer, and his brother was a sax player. And they bought this studio in Boston, and they had it for almost 30 years, and I grew up in it. It was amazing, and they could, they had these Presto 1D lathes, which were fixed pitch, meaning the groove didn't vary on the lacquer when they cut it. It wasn't that sophisticated, so you had to know how to make a 45 or 78 or whatever it was at the time, or 33, and plan for it, so you could get the time of all the songs on one side. They used to cut a lot of lacquers there, and they would go for pressings, the pressing plants. They'd cut a lot of lacquers for people who were doing parties and skating rinks, and I mean, it was really like a full service studio. They would they would hire the talent for people who wanted to do commercials. They would send my dad and his brother the ideas for the commercials, and they would then go out and find the talent, and pretty soon they put together a pool of talent that they would call, and they'd bring in arrangers, and
amazing.
Yeah, and so it was this company. Actually, it's a funny story. This company hired them, and they specialized in doing commercials, and they wanted to make commercials affordable for the average business. Joe's Hardware Store, Mary's Bakery, that kind of thing. And so they did 32 big band tracks, all different. 1 minute, 30, and some of them were 30 seconds.
Wow.
And they sent salesmen out. This company sent salesmen out to canvass the country. And they said, the promise was, you can have your own commercial for this was in the 60s, have your own commercial, complete, everything. And your own music, your own, done for you, and your the lyrics would be for your business and all that stuff, and it would be written for you for $250. And so,
fantastic,
right? So because they only had 32 tracks, they had these colored pins on a big giant map on the wall, and they tried not to use the same track within 250 miles of the same track, because they had to reuse them, even though the promise was it was all original music.
Oh.
So one day Harry from Harry's Hardware is going to visit his relatives in the next state, and he hears the same music on Mary's Bakery commercial.
Oh.
Goes bananas. But every week they were doing 30 or 40 commercials. If you can imagine this, I remember them bringing in the arrangers and the writers and the singers, and they would have a couple of days where they would do all these commercials, and then they'd have to be edited up, and then they'd be sent to the clients and all that stuff. And these salesmen were just covering the country. It was pretty amazing. Pretty amazing stuff.
That's crazy. So 32 original songs.
Yeah, 32 original big band tracks with them. And the melody, well, there was a melody on it, and then they had to fit the lyric that they came up with.
Harry's
and
Hardware.
Yeah. And yeah.
Mary's Donuts.
There you go.
Bakery.
Exactly. And so, but they had to, because of it was really
Apologize for
interesting.
my singing.
Because of the lyrical content,
yeah,
they had to then pick the track to go with the lyric, because not every lyric would fit on any track. So there was always this mixing and matching of what will go together, and the arranger was trying to write they're talking about Harry's Hardware, so how do you make that interesting? And so they would try to match it with a melody that could sing the words they wrote, and they really did a great job. I mean, they did a wonderful job, and everybody was happy, except when they went to a different state and heard their supposedly
a unique song being played.
Unique song, yeah.
Or maybe if the melody was a little different.
No, it was all locked in. It was all like 2-track band tracks.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
so, but that was so when you're in a full service studio.
Let's have this Groucho Marx kind of like, we got this song for you, kind of like visual.
But that's what it was like.
What was your father's name?
Milton.
Milton.
Yeah.
Nice. And his brother?
Herbert. So it was Herbie and Milty.
Herbie and Milty.
Yeah.
And Shelly.
And yeah, the white triplets. So You know, we were talking before about making stuff sounding finished and stuff all hidden aside. What I was going to say was, when stuff was 4-track or even 8-track, if you had a set of drums all on one track, even if you had like a 4-track, you'd have the whole rhythm section on one track sometimes. But you'd at least have a full set of drums on one track. And 8-track, maybe you'd separate the bass drum, because that was always the big thing on 4-track. Now you don't have enough bass drum in the mix. But even if you separate it, you'd still have your cymbals and your tom-toms and snare drum and all on the same track. So we always put a little bit of reverb on the snare drum when we recorded it. And just a halo of it, you know, because when you got to the mix, if you didn't have any reverb on it, you'd have to put reverb on an entire set of drums or an entire rhythm section.
Sure,
and
that
it
makes sense.
Didn't work well. So you'd have to really pre-mix everything as you were recording. And so as it became 16-track, the habits...
Were you staying in mono, so one kick and all the rest of the kit, or was it stereo?
No, it's usually mono, because you'd run out of tracks pretty fast.
So just 2 tracks of drums?
Yes,
kick,
on an 8-track.
Kick and everything else?
Yes, kick and everything else. And then sometimes you had to bounce it together because you ran out of tracks. So
can you tell me what records and 8 tracks that were done like that? You can think
everything.
Of any couple of records that people might want to reference.
Moondance on Van Morrison, Moondance.
Really?
Yeah, and
nice. You see, this is the stuff. Like, I'm sitting here as a fan, going, okay, now that I know this, I want to go and listen to the record.
Right.
So Moondance is 2 tracks.
It was 8-track at the time.
So it's 2 tracks of drums.
Yeah, it'd be 2 tracks of drums. Some of it might have got bounced down to the 2 tracks. Might have got bounced down to 1 because we needed more tracks. I don't recall, but we always listened in mono on 3 speakers, and it was because the 3 speakers made everything, whatever wasn't correct about one speaker was corrected by the other one that had differences, and the total of what you were listening to was correct. So it was amazing the way we worked, and the way I learned to work from guys who were just really great at what they did. But my point is, when we go to 16-track and then 24-track, I wanted to continue, and other guys like myself wanted to continue putting the reverb on the snare, right? Just a little. But the producers were afraid. Now they could separate everything. They wanted everything separate and everything dry. And I used to say, all right, look, you'll hear, let me show you this when we get to the mix. But on a 16 or 24 track, we had room to do a snare with a little reverb around it and a snare dry. So that satisfied the producer. They didn't feel locked in. But the point that, where I'm going with this, and the point I'm trying to make, is that when you go to a mix, and you can all try this now and you'll see, when you go to the mix with a snare with a little reverb on it, and you add EQ and more of whatever you want to put on it, it's a much more powerful sound than just a dry snare drum into your reverb at the time. It is not the same by a lot. Sure, everyone does that now. It's dry, and you put your effects on, and I get it. But I'm here to tell you that it's a much more interesting, and to me, my taste, more interesting and more of a layered effect of sound by putting even guitars, a little bit of an effect on the guitars. When you get to the mix, you're not doing anything excessive, but you lock it right into the track.
Right.
And when you get to the mix and you add your effects, you add your stuff to it, it's very different than putting it on a dry guitar.
Right.
So it's just a little thing
plus
that people at home and people in the studio can try.
When you're committing to a sound, it affects your next decision.
Yes. And sure, because when you're hearing something more finished, when you're working with it, it's more fun to listen to. You know that it's going to be there when you get to the mix, because you can't, all the stuff about we'll fix it when we mix it. You can't promise your client. As an engineer, I can't promise my client that I'm going to be able to get him what he's hearing now that he loves. You got to lock it in because it sometimes doesn't happen twice. You know, like I remember on Music from Big Pink, when Levon sang, he was playing drums and singing. Now we're doing this four track. So we decided to put the voice right on the drum track because it was already in every drum mic. And so we put the reverb on his voice and we got the drums to sound correct, and it all went on one track. Imagine, it was like, but
the drums and the vocals are on one track.
Yes. And because we're listening in mono, even though everything is going to separate tracks, well, 4 separate tracks at the time, we're listening as a finished record. So you have to, and you're forced to, get everything to sound correct at the time. None of this I'll do it later stuff. We're going to do this now. And sure, what we ended up with was we had a lot of times bass and piano on one track. We call it high and low. So when you got to the mix, you could tilt. If you needed a little more piano because it was brighter than the bass, you could EQ it and tilt it that way, or a little more low end on the bass and tilt it that way so it would fit in. Because you never knew if you had some overdubs and stuff, how it was all going to go together later. So we combined those things, and if Levon wasn't singing, it was all the drums on one track. And seeing the musicians through the window, hearing it come back to you, mixing it, getting it to sound correct is very different than staring at a couple of speakers and trying to remix it, if you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
I mean, I get that not every circumstance allows for this, but I'm just saying that if you can emulate what I'm talking about in some way and force yourself to make decisions now, even if you have to put the raw stuff on separate tracks because you're nervous, or your producer's nervous about it, or the artist is nervous about it, and I get that. Try to lock stuff in, and when you get to the mix or in your own time, fool around with it and see. You'll see what you get from this. It really works surprisingly well.
I know, it's amazing.
And
I made an Augustana record, and we used that album as our reference.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I would never have guessed that was all drums and vocal on one track.
Yeah.
I think that would have scared the crap out of me, quite frankly. I mean, we cut the album essentially live-ish. Yeah. There were some overdubs, of course. There was a couple of tracks that we did piano and vocals live with the band. Mm-hmm. That was tough, but not drums and vocal on one track.
Well,
I'm glad I didn't know that when I'm listening to that album, because I probably would have shot myself in like frustration trying to emulate your sound.
When you're in a room where you know what you're hearing,
because your snare sound was so good on that.
Yeah,
okay, so
there's a few of us that work on it.
Oh, I'm sure, but and very humble of you. But what? Come on, I'm going to be a real do you remember anything about the drum recording? What you would have used? Because the band is used very, very often for sonics, especially in this day and age.
Yeah,
you know, with a lot of kind of East Nashville sounding bands, a lot of recordings, people are emulating those records quite a lot. So
I don't remember a whole lot about the mics and stuff, but I remember we used what we had, and see, there's a difference here.
Sure.
From a lot of things that are done today. Their arrangements and the key of the song make such a difference when you're creating music. It's like incredible. The keys were right for the songs. Their arrangements were right for the songs. The way these guys played, they played like the wind. It was fabulous. And when you play like that and your instruments make a sound, it's much easier when you're engineering this stuff. It's always tough to get what's in someone's head to come out of the speakers and record it so that it's really the essence of the band or any band. But they had a sound, and because of how they played, like when Levon played, his drums sounded great. Our job was to capture that, which is not so easy. But we did things like, I remember the bass drum was making the first floor tom the bottom head ring like crazy. And we liked the tuning of the first floor tom, and we didn't want to change it. So we put a piece of cardboard between the bass drum and that floor tom, and it stopped that, whatever was going over to that floor tom to make it ring, it stopped that. So it didn't ring anymore, and the cardboard wasn't in the way. And I mean, and there's also a thing to say for risers. Some of these bands the drums were done on risers. And for some reason, they were only like 9 inches off the ground, roughly, give or take. Some of these risers, for some reason, when drums are done like that, they have a different appearance in the mix. I don't know what it is. I just know I really like it. Like with Tom Petty, we did a lot of the drums on risers, and there's a difference when you do them on the floor and on a riser. So, I mean, sure, I've done a lot of drum kits on the floor, and everybody was happy with it. But there's something about the appearance of the final piece of music when the drums are done on a little bit of a riser. They're a little elevated. They almost are elevated in the mix. I wish I could put it into words, but I can't. It's just more of a...
Absolutely.
This is something that's different, you know.
No, that's fantastic. I've met a couple of people that do that. I know... I've never compared, so I don't know exactly. You'll know better than me, but I know with my friend Dave Jordan had done both. He did the drums on the concrete and the drums on the riser. Mm-hmm. And I think he liked them on the riser in some circumstances, and I'm paraphrasing, just because the low end wasn't quite as big on the super lows and was a bit more focused. That was his... It's
interesting because I tried building a riser at a studio that didn't have one, and it didn't work well. I don't know. I mean, we tried a lot of things. We tried stuffing it underneath so it wouldn't ring. We tried a lot of things, but there's something about, I don't know, maybe it's an old style construction that
Sure.
Anyway. So
yeah, it's hard to replicate things sometimes because there's so many accidental things that you don't know. And like you're saying, out of necessity, you chose mics that were available.
Yes.
And it reminds me of, it's sometimes our job is to get in there and reimagine other things, and sometimes it's just get out of the way and capture it.
It's true. The way we learned to make records when I was a kid was you go out and move the mic before you add EQ.
Sure.
And you learn how to mic the room. And you learn how to set up instruments, and you learn that the sound of the instrument isn't the sound of the instrument until it gets this far away from a horn or a drum or whatever.
Right.
So close miking, a lot of times it makes things sound smaller, even though you think they're bigger.
Sure.
It's got all this low end, but then you have to trim it out of there, and now it's smaller. But if you can, modern music needs stuff close mic, but you're wise on certain things to use a mic a little further away, because the sound isn't the sound till it's about 3 feet away from the snare or from the horns or from the guitar amp or what it might be. Right. And you can put the two together. You can mix the two together, and that's always, a crowd pleaser. A lot of, people say, how'd you get the sound on that? How'd you get the sound on this? How'd you get the sound on that? How about it was out of desperation?
Sure.
I got this band standing around me with a producer and somebody from the label and the management, and they came to work with me to get something that they might have heard I did for someone else, and they're counting on me to come through for them. And this thing sounds like cack. and cack.
I haven't used that for a while. I'm going to bring that back into my vocabulary. It sounds like cack.
And how'd you get that guitar solo? I don't know. I pushed every friggin' button on the console that had an effect, and then I ended up using them all, and that was the guitar sound. I don't know. I just was desperate. It was wasn't working. So a lot of sounds we get from desperation, being desperate and saying, "Oh man, it's not thought through. It's sort of more of a feel. Does it work with everything?"
That makes sense. I find that sometimes when I'm reverse engineering, breaking down a mix, I realize as I'm breaking down the process and maybe the plugins and the EQs on the console and the compression, I realize sometimes it doesn't make much sense. But then I start to explain to people, well, that's because I may have started with this EQ and this compressor, and it sounded great. And I brought in another instrument. And then when I added the vocal, this instrument I started off earlier now is no longer bright enough. But if I go back and brighten the first in a chain, it's going to affect the reaction of everything else.
Right.
So you end up with sometimes 3 or 4 EQs or 3 or 4 compressors. And it makes no sense when you're looking at it from the back end, from the end. But because it's a process, you know, you're mixing and you're changing this, which affects this. You don't go back to the beginning and restart. You just kind of like you add something up at the end again and again and again.
Sure.
So it's hard. It's hard to explain it sometimes because it's those decisions were made, like you say, out of desperation. Like, I need to make it sound better. I can't go back and start again. I don't have time. There's a guy shouting at me, you know. Sometimes that happened to me as an engineer. Warren.
Yeah. Where is it? Where's the goods? Where's the beef?
I remember recalling a mix with Jack at my old studio, and we had the whole band there, and Stephen had brought down Randy Jackson and wanted to show off this song, and it didn't come up very well. I didn't put it. I'm sure you've had this. Well, you may not have done. You're far more skilled than I am, but it didn't come back very well.
No, I've had it.
And so I had to be like, oh, you know, and just be like frantically like, oh no, I've repatched this wrong, and oh
no, I've had it happen.
And of course, you know, they were laughing it off.
Yeah,
like, oh, you know, silly limey screwed it up. But to me, you know, I just felt like my moment was I blew it. So yeah, so I and Jack, as you know, is a very, very, you know, he can be quite a nice, relaxed guy, but sometimes he just gave me the look.
Yeah.
You know that look?
Yeah. Oh, I know it well.
He only shoots it like once a year.
Yeah.
But he can just be like,
you should have known this.
And he just looks up at you.
This shouldn't be happening.
This shouldn't be happening.
And you know it.
And you know better.
But I'm going to look the other way. I don't want to speak for Jack.
No,
I know the look.
Yes.
Luckily, I haven't gotten it too many times.
Yeah, I've only got it a couple of times. I think twice I remember specifically, and that was one of the 2 occasions. Yeah.
Well, you know, talking about getting sounds and stuff, really, I remember one of the shows we did, we talked about using inline pads and stuff. And it's important to try that stuff and see if you can improve the sounds of your recording, so you got something to bring to the mix, you know.
Sure.
If you know that your speakers are correct to you, and they relate to your car, they relate to the outside world, and the volumes you use to figure out, you know, what's going on with mixes that aren't working, your playback volumes, you can accomplish anything. And I mean, you know, early on I learned that the rules are there are no rules, because if you always start with the bass and drums when you build a song, and you come across a song that doesn't want to be built that way. And I've had it happen where I had to build it from the vocal down. As a matter of fact, I had to find the most feeling instrument on the track because everything was a little messy. And these were done by pros. It's just the take they picked.
Sure.
And my job is to put it together for them to have a finished piece of music that's exciting and you know what they're looking for. And I remember thinking, all right, the vocal is the only thing that has any feel and that I can work off of. So I got a basic vocal sound, a little reverb, a little something on it, a little EQ, and I put the vocal up. And then I picked the next thing that was the next best feeling thing, which I think was a guitar. So now I worked with that and EQ'd it to the voice. And everything else, there were a few other things after that, you know, had good feel, but in lesser order, you know, like further away from, not as good feeling as the voice. But then I had to change the time of a few things to fit in with the voice, guitar, and maybe the keyboard. So I had to maybe move some things around time-wise. And
how are you doing that?
By sliding it with a delay.
So what delays were you using in those days?
Well, probably at the time it was an SDU 3000, or it was on the stuff I'm talking about, or or one of the Eventide delay lines.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, and then sometimes we were able to play back stuff off the record head and then fool with that, you know. But anyway, the point being is that I built it from the top down because I couldn't get it to work any other way. And if I went by, you know, what everyone else is doing, it wouldn't have come out as good because it didn't apply to that song.
It's interesting when I first started off and I was reading all the magazines, and you know, I would found this different correlation between traditional rock producers, engineers, and mixers, and pop R&B guys. What you're explaining is what I would find with the R&B guys. Mm-hmm. The guys mixing like Luther Vandross and all those great records would always get an amazing vocal sound and then fit things around the vocal and make it very vocal centric. Mm-hmm. Where the rock guys, and I can be accused of this, get the drums sounding great, put the bass in there, put the guitars, put the keys in there, figure out how to put the vocal in last. And so that's a very vocal centric R&B pop way of doing
Interesting.
it.
Because whenever I'd put the vocal in last, I couldn't get enough vocal. It was already smashing +5, you know. So I would always, as I was mixing, I'd throw the vocal in on top of the track and see how it fit. And then I'd take it out and work maybe for a while more and put it in again, see how it felt, and try to work with it, but around it and accommodate it. So when I got everything in, I didn't have to pull the voice down into the track. The Rolling Stones are the only ones that can use the voice that close. Mm-hmm. They put mixed voice like right in the track, but it drives the track. And I've tried it. I don't know how they do it, but in how I see it, I need the voice to drive the track and carry the track. And it doesn't have to be extraordinarily loud. I'm just saying that everything has to be loud. All the instruments have to be loud. The voice has to be loud. And if I pull it down so it's like a little bug trying to peek over a big log,
right?
It doesn't drive the track.
You're opening a whole can of worms of esoteric conversations here, which I love, because when you talk about the Rolling Stones, you've got Mick Jagger's voice, who's not a traditional like 3-octave range rock and roll singer, but he has such a character voice that's sort of really engaging to your ear.
Yeah.
That you're making me think about it. It's like you can pull him into the band a little bit because his voice has got so much character that your ear gravitates towards it.
Some of his older records, do you ever hear how loud the maracas are?
Yeah.
Well, I understood from somebody that was on those sessions or saw how it was recorded that he plays those while he's singing.
Yeah,
so they're going in the vocal mic with his voice. You're not getting rid of that anytime soon. No. And so even at a low level.
You mean you weren't using multiband compression in 1965?
And so that, even though
frequency gating,
of course,
yes,
of course we did. But the maracas was so loud that it was driving the track.
Right.
And even at a low level, you say to yourself, "Holy cow! It's almost louder than the voice." But without it, it would just be quite different and not as exciting, I think. And it's not conventional, but it works.
So who played the cowbell in Honky Tonk Woman?
I don't know. Pretty great. You know, if you listen, everyone talks about the bass drum in that record. You hear that thing? It's like, it sounded like I think it was a 26-inch bass drum with 2 heads on it.
Oh, was it 26?
2 full heads. That's what I understood. Because we all wanted to know, what was that sound?
Oh, you wanted that sound?
Oh, well, everyone wanted the sound. I as a matter of fact, I'm not going to say who this was, but a president of a label said, I want that bass drum on every record we make from this label.
It's 40, 50 years ago. Which president was it?
No.
Oh.
Not doing it. So, onwards and upwards, as professional as we are. No. So, I laughed when I heard this, because when you listen to Honky Tonk Woman, the cowbell and the bass drum are just fabulous, and of course the snare and stuff. But it's great. If you notice, when the band comes in, you can't hear the bass drum anymore because it's like a beach ball. It takes up too much room. As soon as you mix it with the bass, it's gone. Yeah. Yes, it's pushing the track, but it's not like it is in the beginning. Right. So how can you have that on every record that you make? Yeah. Yeah, it's the most fabulous bass drum sound ever if it's by itself.
I started learning that with more modern mixing where now you can have this massive, roomy, huge drum kit, and you have that when it's like, but then when the band comes in, totally different drum sound.
Yeah.
You just have it featured for that moment.
For a moment, yeah.
And it's almost like going back to the Mick Jagger voice. It creates that illusion of all that space and that huge drums. So even though it's not there for the rest of the track, your imagination fills it in.
For sure, right?
It's like this way soloing sometimes for me is counterproductive because if I solo something, I hear it, I take it out of solo, I think it's loud enough because my ear's now tuned into that guitar part. And then the next day I pull up the track, I'm like, where's that high guitar part? I swear it was louder than that. And then I solo and go, oh yeah, there it is. So I've just sort of focused my ear on it. So, how'd you end up in Hollywood? I mean, this is a lot of East Coast stories.
I wanted to be an actor.
You wanted to be an actor?
No,
I can't say.
No. Actually, it's interesting. Years ago, Jimmy Iovine and myself worked for the same studio for a record plant in New York. And he asked me to engineer a record for him, and we had success with it. And he said to me,
Which one?
Because the Night. He asked me to mix that record for him. And he and Tom Panunzio recorded it, and he and I mixed it. And when that was successful, he said, and it's funny, he was a little shy about asking me because I'm 7 years older than him. So at the time he was pretty young. He said, would you engineer something for me? Would you mix something for me? Sure. I thought it would be fun. And it was. And we made a really good record together. And then he said, if we could do this, we could do more together. Why don't we talk about doing more? And so right after that, we did songs for different labels, because once you have success like that, you get to start getting a lot of phone calls. So then we did.
It's such an amazing song.
It's a terrific song. It's a Bruce song.
Bruce Springsteen, yeah. Because the night belongs to love. And I remember listening to it when it came out.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Jimmy did a great production on the song, and he
got the vocals fantastic.
Yeah, he got the song from Bruce because Patty. She was signed to Arista, but Patty was a poet, or is a poet.
Yeah.
And he went to Bruce and said, Bruce, I'm doing this Patti Smith record, but I'm not hearing a single. You got anything? He said, Bruce says, I got this song that I wrote, but when band and I play it, it doesn't sound like us. But here, take a listen. And he says, I'll take it. And so, then the rest of the story.
That's a nice gift.
Yeah, right. And so Bruce had other songs that he wrote that were fabulous songs, but when he and his band played them, they didn't sound like he and his band. So they gave them to other artists, And that happened a few times. But anyway, so we did some songs for some labels and nothing happened. We didn't have any success. And then we got the opportunity to do Tom Petty just before Damn the Torpedo. So we went out to Los Angeles, and we were out in Los Angeles for, maybe 9 months working on that album. And
which studio did you cut it
in? Sound City. And then we mixed it in Cherokee.
Oh, Cherokee.
And then we
was that on the Trident in those days?
Yes, Trident A range.
Yeah, nice.
And Sound City, we did it on that old Neve that sounds great. And then we mixed one of the songs, I think, on Record Plant New York. And then
where did you mix Refugee?
At Cherokee.
I love that track still.
It works.
Yeah, it's a great track.
And that band, it's another, it's another example of
It's that
the arrangements. Yeah.
It's that
the sound of their instruments and the arrangements and the
Ben
melodies
Mont's
and the songs and the
Hammond.
guitar and the Hammond together. And holy cow, what a sound these guys make. And again, it's about capturing what they do, you know.
There's, it's interesting because I hadn't thought about it, because you brought up those two artists, Patti Smith and Tom Petty. There's something in the vocal delivery on both those songs which shares something. It's almost like the key is perfect to just show off the like as high as they could go before they broke, so it just sounds urgent. Because she's like, because she belongs to love. For her, that's like, because she's like, in the verse, she's like, come on, baby, take my hand, da-da-da. But when she goes to that chorus, she never really had a super high voice, but it just kind of goes to the edge of her voice. Yeah. And then with Tom Petty, no, live like a refugee, don't want to live. It's again right at the. There's a
certain amount of
urgency.
excitement when artists sing at the top of their range. I describe it as the top of their range.
Yeah.
It could be close to the top of their range. You still have to have some quality in your voice when you hit those notes. You can't be too high. But if the song was a step down, it would, a lot of times these songs just laid there. Just were like, because the key is so critical. And I think that's one of the things that the viewers and the listeners here can fool around with when they produce produce themselves or produce other artists, is fool around with the key and see where the artist and the song sound the most alive and most exciting. And there is a place. And without that, no matter how great your mix is, no matter how hard you work on it, it's just going to lay there. And there are, it's not always at the very top that works best. Sometimes it's just down a little bit, down a little further, but you have to fool with it. It takes some playing with the song and the artist, fool around with where the artist sounds the most important sounding, where the song comes alive, where the chorus comes alive, how the verse goes into the pre-chorus and the chorus, and does it lift, and all those things you need to hold the listener there and keep them from hitting the next button, you know.
Makes me think also about tempo. When I worked with with Dan Rothschild, told me that his dad, Paul, would keep going faster and faster and faster until it felt like it was too fast, and then come back one.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
everyone has their ways of doing it, and that's the truth. It's that there are all these elements, and if you ever took a finished mix, like let's say you have everything up on the board, you have all these tracks up, and you have maybe a little very speed oscillator on your tape machine or your DAW. You speed it up maybe the tiniest bit, or you slow it down the tiniest bit, whatever it is. And anyway, you've reached the final mix, and everyone's really happy with it. If you ever take a minute to dissect it and say, all right, what would happen if we made the tempo go either way? Falls apart. Now we're assuming that we have the mix here.
Sure.
Which only happens once generally. That's it. You're going to get that one time, and it's not going to appear again. Change of balance within the song of any instrument, even the littlest bit, a pencil line's worth, changes dramatically. Everything involved in making that song a finished song is like this at that point. But think about it. How many variables are there at that point? There's each instrument. There's every overdub. There's all the vocals. There's the relationship of all those things. There's the sound on each one of those things. Try altering one of the sounds, you know. And it's great to play like this against the finished mix, because you start to understand what it takes for it to sound finished. Gee, I wish there was more drums. Put in more drums. Watch your mix fall apart. It's going to go right in the dumper. Because it doesn't want more drums, or you would have made them louder to get to the final mix. And when you start fooling around with these mixes that have become like this, and they're so tightly knit, you realize that it isn't always going to come out the way you want it to be. Huge drums. No, the drums had to be part of the other instruments, and it became a wall of sound. Or not a wall of sound. Whatever it was. In other words, if you serve the song, you start doing things that you might not ordinarily want to do or think of doing. But the impact of a song that's done correctly by everybody involved is so powerful that it doesn't make any difference if your drums are the best drum sound ever recorded or mixed, you know.
Song for me that just has a sound that is like nothing else is definitely Mind Games. When his voice comes in,
yeah,
it's like, oh, my hairs are standing on end. I remember hearing it as a kid, and it doesn't sound like anything else that Lennon did, but it's just that Mind Games. It's just like this wall of his vocal that is so unique, and obviously for anybody who loves music, it's a Beatle, so it's almost this sort of, you know, it's the closest, I think, and I love Imagine, obviously, and I love Double Fantasy. It's one of my favorite records. I love Plastic Ono Band, but there's something about Mind Games, just that song in particular, that makes me feel like it's a Beatle more than do you know what I mean?
You know,
because it has a lot of art, and I know that, you know, that you worked on a lot of those records, so you probably have a way of.
I understand. No, I you know, it just. In where you're going with this, Moondance, that album, if you listen to that album, I think it's the first 6 songs, Van's voice, the way he's singing those songs from one to the next is totally different. Like, he's in character for every song, but a totally different character, but you don't notice it. Most people have never noticed how different he sounds in those first 6 songs from one song to the next, where he changes his voice to make the song work, or he becomes the song. I'm not a singer or a writer, so I don't know how he thinks about it. And he probably doesn't think. He probably just feels, and he's going for it. Who could figure this stuff out? I don't think anybody is that's talented like John or Van. Thinks any of this stuff through. I think they're just feeling people that are going for it, and this is what it takes to express the song. And it comes out how it comes out. And they don't, if you notice, they're not saying, oh, this song isn't like the first one, and it isn't like the third one. It doesn't belong on the same album because they're not alike. Get the hell out of here with that stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, you have to serve the song.
Absolutely.
And the interesting thing is, no matter how different he sings every one of those songs, they all belong on the same album. It's the most remarkable thing. And the same thing with John. He has voices for his, you know, for each song he sings. He expresses himself in a different way. His voice changes tone. But it all belongs on the same album, and nothing sounds like the thumb on the hand where it's all like different than the rest of the fingers. You know, it's like, oh, that's really odd. There's nothing like that going on. It all works. It's all musical.
I feel like that's amazing. I feel like for me that the thing about Mind Games is the production, the mix, everything about it. I think of a story of, I'm sure you've heard the story, that when Clapton played on While My Guitar Gently Weeps, they're like listening to it and they're like, oh, sounds really good, but it doesn't sound like the Beatles, because, you know, he was a skilled blues rock blues guitar player, so they put it through a Leslie and screw it up, and then suddenly, oh yeah, that sounds like a Beatle track. There's something about Mind Games when I listened to it and I first heard it that and I love Plastic Ono Band. It's one of my favorite records, and it's up there in my top 2 or 3 favorite records for rawness and passion and everything. But Mind Games, the song in particular, the crazy delays on the crazy delays on everything. It sounds like it's just this wall of sound.
It is, but it lends itself to that.
Exactly.
It isn't something that's being forced. It actually, all those sounds are really an extension of his voice and that melody, and you know,
Was that Roy's influence?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Roy had a lot to do with a lot of John's stuff and his influence on me. He was really my mentor, and I miss him terribly. But some of those records that we did, there was a lot done behind the scenes. After it was recorded, when certain people weren't around, it might have been just Roy and I working on stuff. It might have been Roy, I, and John, myself, and John working late at night on stuff that won't be discussed here. But it makes a better record.
No, Jack told us about Imagine.
Yeah.
Like, finished the mix. And Roy's like, was it Roy?
Yes.
Like, I think we should just put a delay on the whole mix.
Yeah.
It's not just on the vocal, on the drums, on the piano. It's on the whole mix.
Yeah.
And then it just went off to radio.
Yeah.
There was no like, we'll check with the label and, we'll call a committee and see if they like the new mix with the slap delay across the whole mix.
Right.
And I was just like,
yeah, it was his idea. But at night, there were other things going on with that song, because I know I was in the room. He and I were, Roy and I were in the room working on that song, and we had elements that were used on that song that I just want to say that maybe if it was done in the daytime, those elements might not have gotten on there. So
yeah, but thank God they were, because
it works. It's a whole thing.
It's that thing, I don't know. I can't compare. I cannot compare anything I've ever done to working with John Lennon. But in my humble and as a fan, it's the mind games, it's the imagines, it's the things that kept that same spirit of the Beatles.
Yeah.
As much as it's John Lennon solo. You understand what I mean? It's like, because what not the only thing we love it, but what a lot of us love and appreciate about the Beatles was the pushing of the boundaries in every way. The songwriting, the performances and the production and everything is what makes it just such the whole package. So when I listen to songs like Imagine and Mind Games, I hear that same thing. As simple as Imagine is, the fact that the whole track has a slap delay across the whole thing makes it just, if I played Imagine to your average person, they would say, oh, it's the Beatles.
Right.
You know what I mean? Oh, that's the Beatles. No, it's John Lennon solo. Like, what's the difference? To them, it's... But I get you get it, because it has that same continuation. It has that same...
It is, and it's an extension of what
that's
came
wonderful.
before. And, listen, I was really fortunate to be trusted to work on that song with John and Roy and Phil. And I mean, imagine being in the room with John Lennon and Phil Spector.
I can't imagine.
No, neither can I, even when I was there. It's like you're at attention, and you hope that nothing breaks down, and you're with these two guys that have worked in the greatest studios with the greatest people, the greatest musicians and producers and co-producers, and you're saying to yourself, they're gonna figure out I don't know what I'm doing, but
you know what? They're all thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
You realize that, don't you?
Well, they're trying to make the best piece of music they can, and they're fans
of other people, just like
absolutely, and the fact that the fact that they trust, the people that they're working with at the moment is a really big deal, and I think every engineer goes through. Well, do I know enough to do this album? It's a really big artist. Well, of course you do. You just draw on what you learned before, and you apply it, and usually the artists are not thinking like that. And see, John was used to working with young guys, young engineers,
very young,
because George Martin trusted Jeff Emmerich and trusted the other engineers who were mostly pretty young, and the Beatles were always around, mostly these young engineers, and so it was nothing it wasn't even a second thought for me to work with these guys and on their part. And, you just hoping that nobody erases anything. There's no catastrophes. I mean, I just remember being there in the room with it, and the vibe is like the most incredible musical vibe. I think that Phil maybe didn't want to wanted to use much more strings than John wanted to use, and they might have before the session, had a quite a discussion about it a few dozen
Quite
times.
a discussion.
Quite a discussion about it. Yes, trying to be diplomatic here. And
That's Shelley for argument.
I think that because they were, you could tell that they weren't talking a lot to each other, but they were making a great record. They were focused on making this great record, and what should the strings play in this part, and is it working? But that's what's great about people who make records like this. They live, eat, and breathe their music, and they're not doing it for other people. They're doing it for what works for their own senses and their own sensibility, and the decisions are made for what they feel and not what they think someone else might like to hear. And I've never seen them be influenced like that. And all of the artists I work with who were successful they fought off any outside influence. And I mean, sure, they listened to people's good ideas, the producer's ideas, maybe the manager's ideas, somebody from the label. They listen to all that stuff, but at the end of the day, they apply what they think works for their music, and
they have to be satisfied.
They have to be satisfied.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, the artist is holding the song close to the vest, and they don't want it to change too much, but sometimes it has to change. And once the artist accepts that the change is a positive change, and can then maybe work with the producer to control how much it's going to change, how much is it drifting away from the original intent of the song, they almost always reach a middle ground.
Right.
And that leads me to something. I don't know if we've talked about this on other shows, but the biggest time waster in a control room is when an artist says to the producer, I don't like the version of this song. I don't like it. The producer says, I love it. This could go on for hours. It sucks the life out of the room. You're not going to get anything done when the argument's over. So once I saw that happen, more than once in front of me with different artists, a couple of times I thought, maybe this will work. And I said, listen, guys, I don't want to get in the middle of this with you guys, because you guys got to sort this out. But it would only take 3.5 minutes to do the other version of the song.
Yeah.
And when you play it back, both of these versions are going to speak to you.
Mm-hmm.
And one of you might be quite surprised at which version you go with. And almost always, they would do the song again in a different way, play both versions back, and boy, oh boy, they
knew what was right.
They almost always, the producer and the artist would then suddenly agree, wow, that version we really need to go with that, even if one of them hated it in the discussion they were having.
Sure.
So I always tried to help that happen early on, because at the heat of it all, no one's going to really think of that. They're not going to think about, oh, let's go out and record this other version. Sounds like a fist fight. You know what I mean?
I couldn't. That analogy is fantastic. Last night, it was 11 o'clock at night, and the guy I was working with said to me, I've got this, we were final mix. I've got this background idea for the pre-chorus. But he didn't say it like that. He came, well, you see, I was thinking this other melody, and you're just like, and I'm like, you want to sing a background? Yeah. And he's like, but I know, I'm just like, just go in and do it. So he goes in and does the background, and I think it worked, and we blended it down lightly, and we moved on. But what was interesting about it, I had exactly the same thought process. I'm thinking to myself, I could literally sit there and debate this with him for the next half an hour, or he could spend, it was 30 seconds.
Yeah, and you were smart to do that, because I've seen it go on for hours. The first couple of times I saw this happen, it was really disturbing.
Oh, I made a record as an engineer. There was one of the bigger records of my career, and I was engineering it. And there would be band and producers and massive discussions that would go on and off for days about songs. And it was just like, if we just go and cut it and we don't like it, it's great.
Yeah.
That's
what the erase button is for.
Yeah.
Get rid of it.
Yeah. But have you found yourself, probably this is something you acquired though with your sort of, as you built confidence in your career and your abilities, you could say that. It may not have been early in your career that you would have been, oh, Mr. Spectre, brandishing that gun at the moment. I was thinking that may not have happened quite so easily.
No.
As it would have done later.
No. How about this? I don't think anybody in that room is going to make any suggestions to those two guys. You know?
Yeah.
It's like they had it covered.
Yeah.
Pretty
John
amazing.
Lennon and Phil Spector, like, okay, I'll let you guys deal with it.
Yeah, they definitely had it covered. Our job was to pray that nothing broke down.
Right.
The console worked. Nobody spilled coffee in the console. The tape machine didn't eat the tape. Anything like that. Just keep the session going, and this is all going to turn out terrific, because you can't help but use your sensibilities. I mean, you're immersed in this song, and you're not going anywhere till this thing gets done.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty amazing stuff. I only wish that some of the audience out there could experience some of the stuff that we've experienced, and from a feeling point of view. Do you know what I mean? What it's like to sit there having this stuff go on, and maybe they can kind of get some of the essence from what we're talking about. But
I feel like one of the things I've learned from different artists, and I've applied to, is with some of the great singers, is how instinctive they are. Like you were saying with Van Morrison, he brings not necessarily in a contrived way, but his personality vocally changes from one song to another.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably purely instinctive. And I've watched guys, especially guys writing in the studio. So maybe the band and the singer have been working up a track, and we're starting to build it all, and we captured the live essence of it, and now it's like it's vocals.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to say it with Steven Tyler. What he would do is he would take the phonetics that he was singing in the scratch vocal and write the lyrics to fit. And then I read, actually no, it was before I'd read that Songwriters on Songwriting book, and Keith Richards made a big deal out of how vowel and consonant sounds are very important. And then it all just kind of blew my mind for a second. I'm like, oh, this is what Tyler is showing me and what Keith Richards was telling me. Now I understand that if he's singing a scratch vocal, and it's he then writes the lyric, keeps the same vowel sound, the same consonants, because that's what instinctively felt right to him. And as a guy that writes songs, I'm like, oh yeah, because sometimes I love a melody and then it doesn't work. And I realized that's because it had a hard sound or a soft vowel sound. And the lyric I'm putting in doesn't have those hard consonants and those vowels. And suddenly the impact of the melody is lost. And as I'm saying it, it seems so freaking obvious.
Right.
But you need sometimes to read Keith Richards and see a guy as talented as a singer like Steven to have it be reaffirmed. And I've been in rooms, and I'm sure you have as well, with singers struggling. And now as a producer, even from not writing as a producer, I can be like, yeah, but your original melody that you had was so much better because of this, and this.
Right.
And it makes them go back and look at the lyrics. But it's definitely acquired knowledge. And I personally need the experience. And I'm just an idiot like everybody else. I need these really, really talented people to prove it to me, to be like, oh, light bulb. I'm not a genius. I didn't just sort of go, oh, yes, I woke up one day and I knew this. No, I didn't. For me, it's all acquired knowledge. And I have to experience it to personally learn from that.
I'm no different. I've learned so much from the artists I've worked with and their managers. Their managers generally are very talented. They know their artists really well. Their approach to solving problems with the artist that come up between the artist and the producer is it just a good manager is worth his or her weight in gold. It's like,
I agree,
because they help steer the artist, to better decisions when you're making a record, and it's hard. It's really, if anyone thinks there's ever been an easy record made, they're mistaken. Think of any, I can't think of one that was easy. I never even used the E word in the control room. It's like bad luck or something. And everything becomes 10 times harder. But it's always difficult to come out with something great, no matter what you're starting with. I mean, a good recording and a great song, certainly, and a great arrangement and all that stuff, certainly eliminate a lot of the issues. But then you're left with other issues, which is capturing it and making it as great as it can be, and all the things that go with it, and all the outside influences that are involved and inside influences that are involved. It's never, ever simple.
Went back and listened to Making Movies all over again, start to and the things that struck me were the separation in the drums, how everything just seemed to have a place. Everything was just, it was like kick, snare, but it wasn't like so disconnected. It was just like, it was, and that was tough to do because like it was only a few years later I'm starting to make my own records, and I'm listening to records like that going, how do you, and this is pre-laying samples and everything. So I'm thinking to myself, how do you get the kick to be just like kick, snare, okay? And I didn't, and I think also the equipment that was available to me when I first started, there was great stuff like sweepable EQs and stuff like this. But when I don't know, the sweet spot on anything, it's a minefield.
Sure.
Of stuff. And then I discovered like APIs and Neves as I got older, and like, oh,
sure,
that's that EQ point. So that's what Shelly must have boosted. Oh. So you just don't know. And I listened to those records and just, that one in particular is a big one. I know we talked about it the first time we sat down and talked. That dobro sound on Romeo and Juliet, how controlled it is. And I'm sure, look, I know Martin Knopfler's an incredible guitar player, so he's going to play very evenly compared with the rest of us.
Sure.
But still, it just sits so beautifully in there.
Well, he plays with his fingers.
Yeah.
So it's harder to record. It's not as clear as with a pick, but it also is a lot fuller sounding than with a pick. So it's always this trade-off.
Do you have a recollection of what you might have used on a dobro?
I might have used a couple of mics. I might have used the 47 FET.
Interesting.
On the front, and I might have used some sort of a pencil mic in the back, like behind with this part, maybe in the back, and probably blended them a little bit. And fooled with it too. He's got a really good sound on his own, but again, capturing it, and it worked.
Yeah, there's just something about that track because, we talked about the electric guitar parts, at the end, and that huge reverb on it, and just the way, as the track's fading out, that's how beautiful that is. And you told me about that sound, how he turned down so quiet and played it, but it was like,
wow,
so much hiss.
God, I was so scared when that happened, because I'm thinking, while he's playing, I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do when I get to the mix? The hiss is going to ruin this most amazing part, the most feeling part I've ever maybe heard on a recording that anybody ever played. And it's going to sound like a friggin' snowstorm.
Yeah.
But we figured it out. And I didn't know he was going to drop down to nothing. But again, he's not thinking by that point. Yeah. He's just feeling, and he's just touching his instrument, and holy cow.
We're going to do the same thing again when Eric and I drive back. We're going to put that track on and listen into the car. That's what we did last time we talked about it. Yeah. That's fantastic.
So it worked, and
look, so
there's always a way,
So here we are. We're in your new place of residence.
Yes.
What are you calling the facility?
We're working on the name now, but it's Aftermaster Studios right now. But that's what we call it,
right?
And we call it the Live Room, but we don't have an official name yet. We're working on that, and
you can keep calling it Aftermaster.
Yeah, there's some interesting things brewing. Maybe by the next interview or on after that, we'll be able to talk about what it is.
Lovely.
Yeah, and it was this new room that we have was Graham Nash's studio. He built that in the 70s, and it's this they really built it right. It's this old line design, and it's proven, and it really works, and we're refurbishing it, and we're trying to retain what's great about it. And, as you use materials to make the studio look more modern, you also are changing the sound. So we're really being very careful to try to retain what worked about the studio. Right. What we felt could have been a little different, we changed and improved on it. But it was all there. I mean, this place is it's one of those things. It's one of those places you walk in and the vibe is already there. You're looking around and saying, "Why does it feel like this? There's no music playing, but it feels great." And so we didn't want to mess with that. So we tried to blend some of the older materials in the room. Some of the wood I heard it was either from his porch or his home or a barn. This wood that looks like redwood. I'm not even sure if it's cedar or redwood. It's just beautiful. So we kept that, and then there's some modern materials next to it. And there's some, a couple of the walls, there's some stone on some of the walls that are really came from a quarry in Arizona that we put up. It's actually Larry's idea to do that. And
for those who are about to ask, we are going to do a full studio tour.
Yeah,
we're just finishing up the studio, so we're gonna wait till it's actually finished before we do it.
Yes, and I'm certainly not doing this alone. I mean, I have a lot of help, and we're doing this together. And there's some really good ideas that are being thrown into the pot, on the table, being stirred up. And Larry had this idea about putting the stone on the wall, and people who work here would come to me in private and say, "Aren't you worried?" Well, no, I'm optimistic. It's not river rock. It's not shiny. It's not like really reflective. Mm-hmm. It's more of a softer stone.
Is this in the live room or the control room?
Both.
Both.
In sections of each room.
Sure.
The whole back wall of the control room is this stone. And you know something? I was optimistic. We didn't know for sure if it was going to work completely on its own. Do we need curtains to help close off some of it because it'd be too much of something and not enough of something else? But it worked on its own. It really is great to look at, and it sounds terrific. So, we did stuff like that, and the control room really sounds really good now. We're proud of it, and the live room is sounding real good, and we're just about there.
Well, fantastic. Well, I look forward to checking it out.
Yeah, we'll talk more about it when we do the real deal, and the other people who are involved, Larry and other people here who are involved. They'll give their opinion about how they saw it. And
wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I think in other videos we do together, I want to talk about everything that you do, because obviously the Aftermath stuff is very exciting. And the reason why I like it is because it comes from you. I mean, it just kind of us, and the reason why it's so important to me to gain all this understanding, because, I say it all the time, there's nothing better than acquired knowledge. Nothing will beat that. So having an understanding, look, we started off talking about 4 tracks and having the whole drum kit on 1 track.
Yeah.
And then 8 tracks and having a kick separately to the rest of the drum kit.
Right.
Going to the band recording vocals and drums on 1 track.
Yeah.
On an album which I've heard name-checked by more bands in the last 10 years than nearly any other record. I didn't know that. Like I said, when we were trying to emulate that record, I'm so glad I didn't know that. Because frankly, it would have really, really, really scared the crap out of me.
I think the good records are transparent in that way. You don't hear the technology. You don't hear the angst. You don't hear like, holy cow, this is all on 1 track. Is this going to work? It works. When it works, it works. When it doesn't work, you don't put it all on the same track. I mean, you do something different. But it's obvious when it works and when it goes together, and the extensions from that.
I've just thought of the most ridiculously random question. because I've never asked this of anybody. I never thought about this, but I have one of these, or kind of one of these. What is the song that, how can I phrase this in the right way? Because what is the song that you listen to? And you don't have to tell me if you don't want. It's okay. That is like, because you've worked on some of the best recorded music, and you've worked on stuff that I love and that true fans like Roy Buchanan records. I'm a huge Roy Buchanan fan because of, from an English perspective, getting into Jeff Beck, and Jeff Beck was such a huge Roy Buchanan fan. That's, for those that are Jeff Beck fans and know Blow by Blow, he dedicates the record to Roy. So for me, it's like, I got into that record and I'm like, who the heck's Roy Buchanan? So then I had to go down to the record store and order some Roy Buchanan records. And, that's back in the days when the record store, and I was like, oh, you don't know who that is? And let me tell you, like, people had to be aficionados of music.
He was 40 when he did his first album.
Wow.
And he didn't do it until then because so many people were after him to do an album.
Really?
He just did this. He didn't want the business part of it. I don't want to do an album. I just want to play and go out and tour and,
He was 40 when he did his first album?
Yeah, he was about 40 years old. I remember the producer telling me. And so he liked this producer, and the producer got him to do this album.
Who was the producer?
Peter Seger. And Peter K. Seger. And so I was lucky enough to work on this album, to record it and mix it, and it was a wow. I mean, I did a couple with him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and
I had to go back and look at the credits and be like, who did this? I want to know all about it.
He'd make that guitar and that amp sing. I mean...
Oh, unbelievable. And it wasn't distortion.
No.
It was just loud.
Fender Twin. Yeah.
On 11?
It didn't sound that way in the room.
It didn't?
No, it didn't. It was healthy in volume, but it didn't take your head off.
Right.
I always wondered if the speakers, there's two speakers in the amp, so I always wondered if there was, one of them was out of phase, because it made this kind of sound that didn't have a whole lot of bottom, but the top end was extraordinary sounding.
Mm-hmm.
I never found out, but...
Did you close mic it or pull back?
Both.
Both?
Yeah, I had both. And the only way you could really capture his playing was to... Sure. And I don't know the proportions I used, but, a healthy proportion from each mic. It wasn't just a little room mic. And of course, the further back you go, the more roomy you're going to get. But we probably had a mic on each speaker, and then probably a mic that was a few feet away, and then a room mic, and just blended that stuff till it sounded right. I mean, a lot of times you listen to each mic by itself, and each one has a portion of the finished sound, but not the finished sound. But yet together, it's a finished sound. Mm-hmm. I have that happen a lot with bass drums, where maybe I use 3 mics on the bass drum, something like close to the beater inside that can take a hit like that, and then something further out, and then something a couple of feet away, some mic a couple of feet away. And when you listen to them separately, they all are a portion of the bass drum sound, but not complete. Frequency-wise, it's odd, but all together, there's a complete bass drum. And then you can EQ it to give it the total sound you want, but I don't know. Everyone does this differently, It's I'm just describing what works for me.
So the question I was going to ask you, it's very odd, but I wonder, is it something that you've worked on that was successful, that you listen to it and go, oh, I should have, oh, I could have? Or are you able to let go? Or do you hear things and you're like, oh, if only I had?
It's interesting. I was telling somebody about this the other day. When you hear something in the control room for months, a song in the control room for months, and there's a certain sound in your head, like you hear it out of those big speakers and small speakers in that room. The first time I hear it on the radio, I want to snap my own neck. It's like horrible sounding because it doesn't sound like anything I recognize. Mm-hmm. And then the second time, I'm always like, oh, that's better. That sounds correct to me. And a lot of times it takes months and months to actually, from the time we deliver an album, it's many months till you're going to hear it on the radio, unless it's U2,
Right.
right? Or Bruce Springsteen, but it's many months before you're going to hear something on the radio, and probably for 6 months or so, I can't listen to that album as an album because I'm full. We've recorded it, we've mixed it, we've mastered it with a mastering engineer. We've mastered it, and by the time you're done, you have tried every single way known to man to get the most out of that music, and then I can't hear it anymore after that. I'm done. Once it's done, and I know it's done, it's like somebody let the air out of the, it's like I'm exhausted, and I'm just spent at that point, and so is probably everyone else that worked on the album. They're just done. But I can't really listen to the music and enjoy it for at least 6 months, And then, of course, if within that 6 months it gets on the radio, that's an exciting thing, because that's so difficult to accomplish, is to get anything on radio.
Mm-hmm.
And but again, the second time I hear it, then I'm like relieved. I'm good.
It was good. So everything's passed the test of time then?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, I have to say that, because we all work on it in that way. We work on it till it sounds right to us,
mm-hmm.
and then it stands the test of time. It's just seems to be an automatic thing. I mean, I don't think of it like that when we're working on it. I just think of, is there anything that I think could improve this, or is there anything that could be better? And we all think like that. People are working on the album, and we go for that. But you got to know when to stop, because you can undo it too. You can undo a beautiful thing and not realize it. So there isn't anything I've worked on where I hear it now and say, I'll tell you, when I do hear that stuff, like, I wished I did this, I wish I did that, I wish there was less hi-hat, I wish there was more hi-hat, I wish I got a better sound on the hi-hat. It's when we go to mastering. So we would always use someone else to master, because they had perspective.
Right.
But not 100% perspective. So what I learned to do was, once I went there all the time and was like driving the mastering guy crazy, I learned to like stop doing that and just send them the album. And let's say out of 12 songs, let's say 4 songs will come back and they were really good. And then I would call up and say, all right, you got these 4 songs and the other 8 aren't quite there yet. Listen to these 4 and you'll see that you captured it. Maybe they'll get 3 more the next time they try. And maybe whittle it down to the last 3 or 4 songs that they're not able to get on their own, because they're not hearing it like we're hearing it. And so then I'll go to mastering. Then I've got it out of my system about the hi-hat and I wish I did this to the drums. I wish I did this to one of the instruments. Maybe if I had changed this. But really, in reality, if you changed anything, it wouldn't be that mix anymore.
Sure.
It wouldn't work. But you can't help it, because your perspective, your view of it is so, I think, twisted by that point that you can't even trust yourself to make a proper decision. Now, there are people that drive right by that stuff and it doesn't bother them, but
right.
Most of myself and most of the other people I've worked with on these albums, they're greatly affected by hearing it over and over again, and I mean, while they're working on it, and they reach the finish line and the mastering part of it and all that stuff. So in order to not torture the mastering guy, I just learned to handle it the way I just described, because
Sure.
It's really not productive.
I can't remember who told me the story of Elton John turning up to mastering. Might have been Bob Ludwig, and putting a background on.
And putting a background on.
Mm-hmm.
Singing in the mastering room.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure he doesn't do it on every song.
No,
but there was a story of him doing it on a song.
Right. And
Elton John.
Well, listen, these guys and girls do it for all the right reasons. It probably, it bugged them. I was working with a really big artist, and he said to me, this vocal bugs me. It's always bugged me. But I thought maybe it would work in the mix. And so he says, I'd like to try another vocal. Why don't you give me a mic here, right here in the control room? I'll sing it again. And we're trying to reach it. We're trying to make a deadline for a release before Christmas. And the record label finds out we're working on vocals instead of mixing. They flipped. But once they understood that it was making it a better record, they were okay. Because they had, they have all these deadlines and stuff. And
sure.
You can't miss that. No one misses their release date. You can't do that. It's a no-no, big one. So everything's planned for that release date, all the interviews,
Did the re-singing work?
Yes.
It was better?
Made it a better record. It was because it was done for all the right reasons.
What record was it?
Never mind. I'm not talking. But,
Well, if it was a hit and it did well.
Let's just leave it like that.
Is that for the memoir?
You never know. You never know. I'm thinking about on my website that I have my daughter Morgan put together all of these albums that I worked on and singles and stuff, and she called it as a working title while she was putting it together for me, Shelly's album covers.
Great.
Yeah, and so it stuck. And so really what I'm thinking about doing is making it so the viewer can click on an album cover and hear a short story about how the album was made,
Great.
A couple of minutes of stuff, and this happened during the making of this album. Something that people wouldn't ordinarily see in print or know. Nothing hugely, nothing personal revealed, about the artist, but that they wouldn't want out there. But stuff that's interesting about the making of the album. And I think it might be interesting to people.
I think it's a wonderful idea.
I think people find some of the stuff I've worked on that's become really successful. People, I think, are really curious about what went on during the making of it. How was it done? Why is it like this?
Sure.
And I'm really humbled to be part of it with those artists and the producers that I worked with, and it's an amazing thing to be trusted in that way. And there's also that thing about what goes on in the control room. It's an unsaid thing. What
happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Yes, exactly. And you just when an artist, after working with an artist for a month or months, and they open up to you about their deepest feelings about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You don't talk to anybody about that.
I also think you've got the engineer's brain as well, where that was sort of like, you're there, you're talking to the artist, you've got a rapport with the artist, the producer's got the rapport with the artist, but there's a respect when you're in the engineer's chair, where it's kind of the producer's artist's world and we're helping them.
Yes.
So even though we're part of that three-way conversation, there's Jack and his artist, and then there's me. And he's brought me, the artist, to work on the same way he did with you, and Jimmy did, and all that kind of stuff. And everybody's talking, but ultimately it's their show, and we're just part of it.
Yeah,
that's the old school, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I mean that in a very, very good way. That's the old school way of looking at it, understanding our roles.
Absolutely.
And I think that's great. But you can save it for the memoir.
Maybe one of the other shows I'll talk about it. We'll see. I'm going to think about it.
So here we are at Aftermaster.
Yes.
You like the way I say it, by the way?
I love it.
Aftermaster.
Tomato.
Aftermaster as opposed to?
Tomato.
Aftermaster.
Yeah.
I'll go all Chicago there.
I like it.
So here we are there.
Yeah.
And what can you tell us more about it?
Well, it's a great sounding technology, and we're very soon. We're having the Aftermaster TV box come out, which is a really big deal. It's It's we're really proud of it. It's got our sound on this chip that takes your flat screen TV and makes it sound like there's much better speakers in it, and it fixes that whole issue about you take your clicker and you're going to raise the dialogue up, and then the explosions come in and they blow you out of the room, and then you got to turn it down, and then the dialogue comes in and you got to turn it up. You don't have to do that, and you don't hear it working.
My wife is going to love you. My wife's in the other room and she's like, we're watching, what was the tank movie recently? You had clips of it.
Inglorious.
Brad Pitt. No,
yes.
the Brad Pitt one.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Can you believe it's such a great movie? Anyway, it goes explosion, explosion, explosion.
Yes.
Tiny little dialect. Explosion, explosion, explosion.
Yes.
So, of course, my wife is screaming from the other room, turn the effing TV down. You turn it down, and of course, it's like you have to turn it back up again. And you can never quite get to the remote before the next explosion goes off.
Yeah. Or before your wife or girlfriend starts screaming about, holy cow, can't you,
I told you to turn it down.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But they're not wrong. And so this solves a really big issue.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, the thinner flat screen TVs get, the smaller the speakers are.
Sure.
They're becoming a fashion statement. Those little speakers can only do so much. Even a soundbar can only do so much.
Sure.
This takes it to a whole another really great place. And also the box can be used for, it's the size of an iPhone, maybe even a little smaller. And it can also be used where you can plug your laptop into it or your iPhone into it and plug your headsets into it and use it freestanding, not with your TV, and have it take the sound. And really what it does is it brings it back to what it sounded like, what the creators heard in the control rooms, much more in that direction than the direction it is without the box. So,
which makes sense, because we're often in these perfectly tuned rooms where we hear pin drop, explosion equally because we're in this beautifully tuned room. But in a normal ambient space, unless you're living in the countryside in the middle of nowhere, you've got street noise, you've got whatever, dogs barking, kids playing, cars driving down the street, all of that stuff, let alone the kettle boiling in the next room. And it's not quite the same as environment as when you're mixing in this beautifully treated studio where ting, ting.
Well, there's the average person out there doesn't ever get to hear what we hear in the control room. We've spent our lives in the control room. We know what it's supposed to sound like.
Sure.
But when it gets onto some of these streaming services, if you were to compare what you're hearing to the original, they're really far apart.
Right.
In terms of feel, in terms of sound, in terms of the experience. This is a much more immersive experience, hearing after master. And
I like that word. I'm hearing a lot of that word these days. Immersive.
Well, we're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. I was at AES meeting, not the AES show, but I was at a meeting maybe 2 months ago, and that was definitely a big discussion.
Well, we know what to do with the sound, so it is immersive, and people are trying to do that with video and are beginning to do it. And the two together is a great combination.
When's this going to be out?
It's just about now.
Just about now?
Just about now. I think within a few weeks.
Fantastic.
Yes, for the TV box.
Great.
And we're already using Aftermaster for mastering, and ProMaster is an offshoot of Aftermaster. It's the same technology.
Great.
But it was designed for people who are basically do not have the money behind, record company money behind them to go and spend all the money they need to spend at the big mastering places. So the big question is, how do unsigned bands, and there are millions of unsigned bands.
Oh yes, there's a lot of unsigned bands.
Right, all over the world. How do they compete? And the answer is, they can't compete in their mastering, and that's the final step. So it really controls everything in the final product. They can't compete until now. In the past, they couldn't afford to go and spend $5,000 or $10,000 or even more for mastering. But now, because this is, and even if you're signed, this works great. But we're talking right now about unsigned bands who can't compete, and by using ProMaster, you can get the volume, you can get the quality. The cool thing is that you get about 90 seconds of your song mastered, but 4 different ways.
Wonderful.
And you don't pay anything until you decide if you like what you're hearing or not.
That's great.
Yes, and so
if you don't like it at all, you don't have to pay.
That's right.
Oh, I like that.
Yes, and we thought you would.
Sure.
And so if you click, yeah, I like this, you get the 4 versions. And what's great about this is, and what I'm suggesting to people that have used it and new people who are going to use the service, is that you let's say out of the 4 versions, you like one of the versions, and that's why you click, yes, I'll buy it. Well, consider this. Try taking one of the other versions and using just the chorus. Put it all back into a DAW. Use one of the other versions to maybe make a bigger, more aggressive chorus, but use the one you like for the verse. Or if the one you chose has a great chorus, pick one of the other versions for the verse and cut it up. And this is what's done in mastering houses. It's not always run through as one song. A lot of times it's mixed and matched. And I'm just suggesting to you that you try it. I think you'd be quite surprised with the result.
That's wonderful. Well, I like hey, get all those versions, and if you don't like any of them, you don't have to pay for it.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful. It's a no risk.
Well, that's what I think. I mean, we tried to make this so
it's genuinely helping people.
Yes, and you know, the argument could be, who is helping these unsigned bands?
Sure.
People don't want to know these bands if they don't have money, and usually when they finish their album, they haven't got 2 nickels to rub together because they've spent all their money making their album. But you have to master. You have to master. If you don't master with us, you got to master somewhere. And buying these programs and doing it yourself can be very frustrating.
Sure.
And you don't have the perspective because of this thing we talked about earlier, where you really have to hand it off to somebody else most of the time.
Right.
Somebody with perspective, and that's what we have.
Well, and also the biggest thing for me is I respect you because I grew up listening to your records, and then I meet you and I like you. So that's kind of a nice combination, isn't it?
I'm glad.
Actually, become friends with the people that you admire. Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure we've both had the opposite experience. Maybe. So I respect where you come from. I also know that privately, off camera, you understand this. You're not pretending like, oh yes, you're going to be Sterling or Ludwig like this. This is because we these are guys that we respect, like Bob and Ted. These guys have spent their whole lives mastering, I was going to say thousands and thousands and thousands of records between them.
Yes.
Bob's time with like Zappa records, for goodness sake. I mean, that's enough for me. Any Zappa connotation, but what's happening here is you've taken all of this acquired knowledge that you and Larry and all of you guys have put together to create the best possible thing you can to help people at a fraction of a cost.
Yes.
Not a fraction of a cost. A fraction of a fraction of a cost.
And that's the truth.
Because I'm a big fan of those guys, a big fan of Bob's, I'm not going to call him understudy because that's really, but Adam Ayan, who works with Bob, is one of my favorite guys to work with. And, but let's just say it's not on the cheaper side.
Right.
They're amazing, and I will always go when I have the budget, but I don't always have the budget.
Right, and you're working with some of aren't you working with record company products now that don't always have the budget to go there?
Yeah, it's
even with the labels now, they don't have the budgets for certain acts. So
I get this question: do we need to master?
Holy cow! what the average person making records doesn't realize.
Oh, I'm talking from labels.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Why, they think you're going to pre-master the...
I just think a lot of the stuff is being done so slammingly loud in the box. And the mastering for me, and this is going off on a tangent, as per usual, Warren's style, but the mastering for me is exactly what you said earlier. Mastering is not always about like making it loud, making it this, making it that. It's that extra step that allows you to sit back and give you some perspective.
Yeah.
That's a big, big deal. So now, because obviously it started as an essential thing, because 20 hertz, 30 hertz on a stylus is basically flying out of the vinyl. It started for and also dynamic ranges, you know, the stylus, the needle would go crazy. And
sure.
So, you know, mastering engineers, there was a whole process. They were taking a tape and creating an acetate, and you know this better than me. And so it was a very, very skilled craft of sitting there, you know, looking through a microscope, essentially, sitting there and making sure that they didn't create a groove that was unplayable.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it sort of evolved from that to this modern thing now, where we're making stuff to be competitive on the radio and consistent, because there's nothing worse if you're the guy listening to demo submissions going from jing, 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 cranking it up to bang, blowing your head off. Yeah. You know, it's, or vice versa. You just listen to 10 slammed loud tracks, and then suddenly the other track gets kind of lost. And how many times, sorry to do all the talking, how many times, you must have had this happen to you, it's happened to me many times, where you send in a mix and it's pretty good, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And how many times, you know where I'm going, how many times did you just limit it a little harder and send it back? And they're like, oh, it's so much better. Yeah. It's naive of us to think, especially with so much stuff being slammed in a box now, that this is an important part. Mm-hmm. I think especially for me, at least for the more organic guys, this is a big deal, because this allows them to compete against, you know, some of the EDM stuff out there, which is the sounds are already so slammed that you end up with square waves on the mix.
It doesn't work. It's hashy.
Yeah.
What I've noticed is that some of the people that master with us will change their mix after they hear the mastering, because it shows up, the mastering shows up things in their mix that maybe they feel should have been done differently. Maybe it's more or less background voices. Maybe it needs background voices. It's a great production tool. Wonderful. To even send your mix through, even if you don't, while you're mixing, send your mix through ProMaster. Right. Listen to what comes back. You're going to get an earful of what you should do that might help you bring your mix to a better place when you're done, because of what it shows up.
And once more, we can do this for free.
Yes, that's right. You can do it for free. I
like that.
Yeah, and then if you like what it is, and send your mix through and master it. But you know, I've seen producers, really successful producers, do this with some of their mixes. They don't talk about it, but it's obvious that they go back and you're remixing after you just heard your mastering. They're hearing something it's showing up something that maybe that they feel could have been stronger.
Which makes perfect sense, because the reason why I've ended up gravitating towards specific mastering engineers is because they're the guys that pick up the phone to me and tell me, hey, Warren, that was really cool what you sent me, but there was a lot of 350 on that. It was? Yeah, you should pull a little bit more out of the bass. It just really rubbed. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, it's another level of being able to hear that.
Yes, and this is just another tool in great record making. It's just all in how you use it, and the rules are there are no rules. Take it, bend it, twist it, shape it. Use it to your advantage to make the best final product you can.
Wonderful.
Fool around with input levels.
We'll put a link for the free way to test it.
All right, great. Very cool.
You rock, my friend. Thank you ever so much for all your time.
And so do you.
We're going to do plenty more. Please leave a bunch of comments and questions below. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing.